This all started shortly after my fiancée, Morgan, and I moved into our new home together in a quiet little town. We still live in the same house. It's a modest, charming place that's perfect for us, and maybe a couple of kids in the future, if we decide to start a family. We met one of the neighbors right away. They were a nice older couple, probably in their late 60s. The neighbors on the other side of us were farther away, so we didn't meet them for a while. We were still in the process of unpacking and setting up when this happened. It was probably around the second week of us living in the house, and we were both worn out from juggling our jobs and trying to get everything settled in the house. Morgan was in the kitchen making pasta, and I was sitting at the table talking to her while browsing for area rugs on my laptop. It was a bit stuffy inside, so I decided to open the back door to let in some fresh air. But as I reached the door and glanced into the backyard, I froze. There, sitting in one of the chairs, was a man. He was hunched over, his head down. When I tell you I almost expletive myself, I mean it. I whispered to Morgan, urging her not to scream. "There's a man in the yard," I said. She came over to look, gasped, and immediately grabbed me, trying to shield herself behind me. She told me to go say something, then quickly added, "No, wait, don't." To be honest, I wasn't sure what to do. I'm not the biggest guy, and even though this man had his back to us sitting down, he seemed bigger than me. Morgan suggested I knock on the glass and tell him to leave, but I really didn't want to do that. The backyard was huge, and right outside the back door was a patio with leftover furniture from when we moved in. The lights in the yard weren't on, but we could see him through the interior light spilling out from the door, which meant he knew we were inside. So against my better judgment, I knocked on the glass and yelled, "Hey, you need to get off our property." The man turned around slowly, giving me a half smile, almost like he was amused. He looked to be in his 50s, with a long gray beard and tattoos all the way down his arms. He stood up and walked toward the door. I made sure the sliding door was locked. When he reached the glass, he shifted his gaze toward Morgan, licking his lips and muttering some vile things. I didn't hesitate. I yelled, "All right, I'm calling the police." I closed the blinds quickly, cutting off his view of us. I called 911 and told the operator to send the police immediately. Meanwhile, I could still hear the man outside, now yelling in a high voice, saying awful things about Morgan. I pressed the phone against the glass, hoping the operator could hear him. She insisted I stay on the line until the police arrived. After what felt like an eternity, it finally went quiet outside. I peeked through the blinds and the man was gone. When the police showed up, they searched the yard, took a report, and left. We thought it was over, until later that night. We were in the living room watching TV when we both heard something coming from outside. I went to the window and cracked the blinds just enough to see. There he was again, sitting in the yard with a cigarette in his hand. He was talking to himself, or maybe trying to talk to us. When he saw the small gap in the blinds, he rushed over and started pounding on the window, shouting even more disgusting things he wanted to do to Morgan. I immediately told Morgan to go upstairs. I didn't want her to hear any more of that. I yelled at the man, telling him I was going to call the police again, but the pounding stopped and he went silent. I waited a few seconds, then checked again, but he was gone. I went upstairs to comfort Morgan, who was visibly shaken. I reassured her he was gone, but in hindsight, I should have called the police again. That's when I heard bumping sounds and knocking. I went halfway down the stairs and heard someone trying the back door handle, twisting and turning it. He was trying to get in. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 again, pleading with the operator to send someone fast. This time, the police arrived much quicker. I didn't tell the man they were coming, but by the time the officers showed up, he had disappeared again. He most likely ran off into the trees at the edge of the yard. Thankfully, he didn't return that night. The next day, Morgan and I went around the neighborhood, introducing ourselves to anyone we hadn't met yet. We also asked if anyone knew a man who matched the description. What we learned was unsettling. A couple a few doors down recognized him right away. They told us he had a history of domestic violence, drinking, and drug problems. Apparently, he was known to be dangerous. He lived just around the block in a small, rundown house. That was the most frightening part. We reported him to the police, but since we didn't have video evidence, they couldn't press charges. We don't know if he still lives there, but we haven't seen or heard from him in a long time. And I really hope it stays that way.